Thank you. My name is David Mora. I struggled with depression for about, I think, 6 years or so. Yeah, 6 years. And I'll say this confidently, you cannot have happiness there's no happiness without suffering.
That we are happy in the measure that we seek the happiness of the others.
And I think that's why we're so unhappy. Amongst the reasons, which are very many, why we're unhappy.
So long as you keep us busy and happy.
It's also part of
We are geared towards happiness. No one wants to be sad.
Yeah.
So hi, my name is Father Martin Mundia. I am a priest of the Prelature of Opus Dei. I work in Strathmore University as one of the chaplains, and I have been working here since the beginning of this year. I also worked here before in the year 2018, again as one of the chaplains in Strathmore University. I studied moral theology as my specialization, and before that I studied Bachelor of Commerce, and I worked in the industry for a number of years before I became a priest. So I don't know if you want more about me. Or...
Nice. So it's interesting. I just realized that you first were in Strathmore before you became a priest.
Yes, well, I was in Strathmore College when it was still Strathmore College, and then I went to the University of Nairobi, Lower Kabete campus, where I did the BCom. And then I worked in a number of companies before I came back to Strathmore University as an alumni relations officer, because at the time we were starting the university and we needed funds, and we were looking at raising money from all sorts of places, including past students. So that was my job, to try and bring the students together to get some money. Yes, and then I also later on worked in Eastlands College of Technology, which is a vocational college, or what you can call a TVET vocational college. Yeah, and there I worked as a teacher, an administrator. We were beginning, so we were involved in doing everything. Whatever needed to be done, we had to do it, so we did it. Yeah, and I also worked there later on as a chaplain before I came to Strathmore again.
University. So you clearly, to say the least, have a lot of experience.
Well, some experience in life, yes, indeed. I have some experience in life. Yeah, because I'm 45 years now. I don't fear saying my age, because that's a very manly thing.
Yeah, I was getting to that because you said that you attended Strathmore College.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, Strathmore College, before it was a university.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was a long time
That
ago.
was a long time ago. Well, not so long ago, because there are obviously older people who have been there. As a college, properly speaking, it started in 1961. So obviously, I was in 1961. But yes, I was in Strathmore College in the 1990s, 97 to be precise.
Nice. Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So I think that will do. I think that,
Great.
of course, and more. So if any case that we want to check up more on you, the link is Tatuma. So further, let's go straight to the business of the day. So we have a few questions to ask you, a few topics that we like to discuss with you, and one of them is the topic of this year's uni forum, which is the search for happiness. So maybe just to begin, what would you describe happiness to be? What does happiness mean to you?
Happiness. Happiness to me means the joy one experiences when you achieve a desired good. So, for instance, right now I'm hungry, and I've identified a place where I can get some good meal. So as soon as I get that good meal and I eat it, then after that I think I'll be a happy man. But then I know I'll get hungry again. So in that sense, we can say that's a sort of a temporary happiness. But then there are other goods that give you a longer lasting happiness. You see, so um, there is lots of beauty in this world. Like in this garden, for example, you look around and see all these nice trees, the sun, and the light, and the people. I think that gives you a longer lasting happiness. I've had an experience at the coast in Mombasa once. We went there, and I remember that moment when we sat on the beach and it was a sunny day, the sky was blue, and the sound of the ocean was. You could hear the sea as the waves broke, and it was just incredible. You can spend hours and hours just staring at the sea, and on top of that, there's someone who offered us some fish. So that compounded the happiness. I'm a hungry man. And then, but just the sight of the ocean and the life there was just amazing. But then I realized then if you keep transcending that and looking at things that are more spiritual and you experience that joy of possessing it, um, then that happiness lasts like forever. Yeah, that's why I mean, I for me ultimately happiness is God. Um, so when I experience uh, God's presence in my life, um, when I am in prayer, when I speak with people and they tell me about their experiences with God, and even when they ask me to pray for them and I pray for them, and some like the leper who came back, come back and they thank you, but I'm like, okay, I'm not the one who did that. It's God. But then you share in their joy, you see, and the amazing things I've seen, I've experienced that way.
So it's not mostly about the recognition, or rather the acknowledgement that you're the one who's done it. It's just because for the joy that they have
They have,
benefited
yes. So
from. Okay.
in a certain sense, happiness is something that is infectious. Just like when you have a great time with your friends, also um, you experience a certain joy that can only come from that, sharing the time together, or some something in common that you have. But for me, ultimately, happiness is God, and I guess that's what heaven is, to be in God's presence forever. And yeah, for then just to like think of some of the greats who have spoken about the topic of happiness. I mean, I think for someone like St. Augustine, we cannot experience, you can say, the fullness of happiness here on earth. So the fullness of that obviously then is in heaven, because obviously here things are limited. We suffer from evil and all that. Yeah, and then yeah. So I guess if you think of it from the perspective of um, the joy that you experience when you possess a desired good, then what happens when you possess, or you are possessed by goodness itself? Then there's no space left for even more happiness. I mean, you are totally fulfilled. You see, and that's ultimately what we are made for, what we long for, to be happy, not just here and now, this moment when I'm enjoying this uh, sunshine, or this plate of food or this cup of coffee or this beer or this wine, but when I'm enjoying it forever.
Wow, fantastic. So, what I'm gathering from what you're saying is that happiness is joy, which is also a gift of the Holy Spirit. So, there's a line you've iterated that you say that happiness is God. So that's our source of joy. That's our source of the fruit of the Holy Spirit. So now, which begs the question: is we've heard of people who are going through depression and anxiety and whatnot and whatnot. Do you think, and it seems to most of them, that happiness is an impossibility in some sense. So what will be your input on that? Is that can anyone be happy? Can everyone be happy? Or are there some people that it's it's in their nature, or rather they have this biological or neurological combination or network in their mind that cannot allow them to experience the joy that we're talking about?
All right. So I think precisely the way we are wired, the way we are created, um, we are geared towards happiness. No one wants to be sad. Um, and in fact, you come to realize that when someone is sad, like someone who's suffering a depression, it's a symptom that something is not right. And so it has to be put right. And someone has to therefore be helped or accept to be helped so that they can go back to being happy, which is like the normal thing. It is also true that our experience in life is that yes, we experience sad moments or sorrow due to various things, the loss of a loved one, maybe if someone fails the exam or is fired or whatever. For takes the place, the guy is hungry and miserable, and yeah, so then we, we need then to find a way to that source of happiness, and that is a normal thing, and therefore I think it is not normal for someone to always be sad, and in fact it becomes at some point becomes impossible to live like that. And I suppose that's one of the things that even leads people to, unfortunately or sadly, take their own lives, because they think, I just can't find any happiness here. Maybe I might find it somewhere else. And yeah, so I think everyone's made for happiness. Well, looking at it from the perspective of our faith, um, you realize that it is God's desire that we be happy. That Jesus says that He wants us to be full of joy. Uh, that I want your joy to be full. You know.
Happier, they make happier.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
happy ultimately is that. Yeah, when He speaks, yes, precisely. The beatitude is a good way of looking at it, by the way, and that's and you come to realize actually the beatitude is God Himself. In fact, now that you mention the beatitudes, and therefore we have to um, strive to live according to the beatitudes. Not only that, when you think also of St. Paul, when he says that rejoice, and again I say rejoice, and he's writing from prison at the time, like my goodness, how can you be happy in a dungeon, enveloped by all this, and darkness, and all this. You can say he had the right to be miserable, but he says no, you have to rejoice and always rejoice. And yes, I guess that's part of the Christian struggle to find that joy in the midst of the cross. Yeah,
To choose happiness.
to choose happiness. Yes, you can realize. Yes, then you can even when your physical capacity is limited, you can still be happy in those circumstances, including, well, if you've been thrown into jail, you can still be happy.
Much more. I think rejoice is a strong word of saying happiness.
Yes,
Like rejoice.
rejoice
It's
is
like
like
celebrate,
yes.
lift your hands up and, wow.
Right.
So which I think I like the fact that you just drawn into that, because we just spoke about Paul being in prison, and he tells the believers that rejoice. So which takes us to the next question. Now, happiness, we've mentioned that our goal is to share in the eternal joy that is in the presence of God, and that we cannot get from this earth. And there's also this idea that despite whatever you're going through, you can choose to be happy. Now, the question that is sort of pops out of that is happiness an end to a means? Or
A means to an end.
a means to an end, or the end
An end
itself?
in itself.
Hmm.
Yes, I think we can speak of, although maybe philosophically it might not sound very correct, as both. Because if you think of it as a means, that means, pun intended, that yes, this we can be happy here on earth, you know, because then we find happiness on earth. And yes, it is true that we can't find the fullness of happiness here on earth, because yes, we have we are going to suffer the consequences of our bad decisions and so on, and just the fact that we live in a broken world. But in heaven, it will just be perfect. The beatific vision, as we know, is, well, as far as we can tell, is a bliss that just never ends. To be in God's presence, to behold God face to face. I mean, um, yeah. So, uh, in that sense, it becomes an end that we want to see God as He is face to face, because then we shall be happy forever, without any iota or anything that can spoil it. You know, unlike here on earth, where yes, things happen, you get sick, yeah. So in that sense, while we are searching for happiness here on earth, which means while we are living the beatitudes, you know, while we seek, which is another very interesting thing, that we are happy in the measure that we seek the happiness of the others, which is part of the beatitudes actually, uh, and you can call it the Christian paradox, that when you give is when you receive, that when you die is when you live, so we have to die to our own selfishness, so on, in order to live. So yes, I guess we can say then it is both a means and an end. In any case, we can speak about how we always work with ends in mind. That you are here in school now, you want to finish. Why do you want to finish? Because of you want to get a job. Why do you want to get a job? So I can get some money to, I don't know, raise a family or help my folks or whatever. So, and then you can go asking those questions. Ultimately, you want to be happy forever. So uh, then you can see that all these steps are sort of means towards that ultimate end. So we can say yes, it is both a means and an end. Obviously, the end in itself is happiness itself.
Yes. Wow. Nice. 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 So now, Father, we're going to go to the next section, which is a hot topic in today's the media environment. Yes. Okay, thank you. Is the issue of the masculinity crisis? Well, the boy crisis, which envelops the masculinity crisis, because nowadays I don't think it's just boys who are in this crisis. I mean, even men who are actually grown-up men are finding it hard to cope in today's society. And of course, being a man myself, I know it has a lot to do with the responsibility, the way what are you actually doing on your part, instead of before you ask for something from society. And this to me is points toward masculinity. It's about embracing the masculinity. While it might be vilified, it might be rejected, it might be abandoned, but what exactly, now in relation to happiness, again, you said whether you're suffering or you're in good, and it's always a good thing to choose happiness. So the question, maybe the first question I would ask to you is that, how do you see the crisis towards the boy and the man today in society? How do you see it? What is your opinion on it? And do you really think that it is worth it sitting here and talking about it?
Yeah, I think it is. It is something worth talking about and reflecting on, with the idea of identifying the problem and the solutions to the problem. And I think one of the unfortunate things that have happened is somehow we have been, or we are being taught to reject our masculinity, which is, I mean, it's just evil in itself. I mean, it's like trying to reject your nature. It should be the opposite, that we embrace our masculinity, that we should be proud of being who we are as men, and therefore to live as such and to grow as such, and to desire to pass on these values to other men. That's why I think it's so important to realize that we are not alone. We are not simply individual beings. It's important. Obviously, we are individual beings, and we need to work on ourselves. And by the same time, that we belong to a community, and so what we do affects the community as well. And it is so important for us, therefore, to embrace the fullness of masculinity, which means to be virtuous at the end of the day. To be a man means to embrace all those virtues that have to do with being masculine, yes, and living as such. And yeah, obviously that means we have to work on ourselves and get rid of those things that get in the way. Ultimately, the vices that we have. So we have to fight that with the virtues precisely, and not to get discouraged, because obviously our weaknesses show, and um, the solution is not to give up. The solution is precisely uh, to use those weaknesses and failings, even miseries, to, to grow. Then they become a sort of a springboard on which we get back on our feet and we keep moving. And that's a very manly thing, the whole thing of getting up on your feet, keep moving, persevering. Persevering is a very manly thing as well. You know, you have a broken bone, well, you keep moving, because if you sit there and wait for help, then you might die there with your broken bone but dead, you see. But if you keep moving, then you get to a place where you can be helped with your broken bones, and then you can find healing. I remember a certain rugby player who he was in one of those big finals. I forget which team they were playing. This was a New Zealander. He was their captain, actually. I forget his name now. But the guy played for like half an hour with a broken toe, broken toe, and he just could let his team down, Um, he was a captain, so he was the one who was like leading the team and giving them the psych, So same thing. If you are the one who's leading soldiers in battle, well, you have to persevere there, and you have to help others persevere, and you have to keep giving them hope. You know, uh, recently I read the story of a certain chaplain of the military. I think that he's been considered for sainthood. It's called Father Capone, who died in the 50s. He was a chaplain in one of the battalions, and he kept so many people alive, uh, many of the prisoners of war. He was also captured with them. He refused to escape, and kept them alive because he gave them hope. hope obviously that he found in Christ, being military chaplain. And circumstances, when you read the book, like, man, how is it possible to even live like this? How can people live like this, or how can they treat each other like this? Uh, but yes, in those circumstances, for instance, we are being starved, we are being given bad food and very little food, and there were thinner sticks, just skin and bones. And he realized, if we don't get more food, we'll die. So he will gather his men in the middle of the night, and together they'll pray to Saint Dismas, who is the patron saint of good thieves. He was a good thief who died with, yes, he died. He was crucified on the right side of Christ. Yes, Dismas, yeah. And then they'll sneak into the dark, and they'll go and steal some food and bring it back and give it to the other prisoners of war. And that way, many people survived. You see, and he had the principle, which was the, maybe you've seen it. It's in many institutions. The leaders, they eat last. Like, if you are a captain, you eat last. Your men eat first. You see. And so you see, all those are very manly things. So I think we need to find a way of embracing all these virtues that then make us to be more masculine.
So, well, there are a few things that have just popped up in my mind, especially in the last bit that you just mentioned. But then I'll just ask later. I think it would be a good segue into our next question. But we've looked at the benefits that come with masculinity, of embracing masculinity. But what would you say are the challenges, or rather the risks, so to say, of embracing this masculinity in our society today?
Yeah. So, well, I guess uh, what we can call risks are also part of what it means to be a man. That means, yeah, the fact that maybe some people might criticize you because, I don't know, you're just trying to live a virtuous life. You'll always find some wet blankets there. Maybe because you refuse to go along with everyone else. So, you risk losing friends because, yeah, they want something that is evil, but we should not be afraid to do that. And the example should be the saints, um, and the martyrs. So, well, if I have to bribe, then I better lose that thing because I want to be honest. If I have to embrace some immorality because, my boys want to go along with that immorality, well, then I'm ready to do that. I'm ready to give up that. And some of the saints that come to my mind are there's the famous, maybe you heard of Saint Athanasius, who was one of the greats in the time when so many had folded, were willing to compromise the faith. And because of that, he he was willing to stand alone. If the whole world was to go against the faith, was to go against Christ, then he said, then I stand against the world. Um, and we have to be ready to do that. And that is a very manly thing. You can say the greatest men, the greatest heroes are the saints. Well, obviously, manly saints, but also the greatest women are the women saints. And you read the stories, it's just incredible. From the beginning of Christianity to today, you read the stories of the saints, it's just incredible. And those, I think, should be for us the model. Obviously, Christ himself, being a man, should be our model. Saint Joseph, well, today we celebrate Saint Joseph. He should be the model of every man. Yeah, so I guess the downside, which at the end of the day is not even a downside, is yes, you stand to lose those who don't want to be men. And well, if that comes to be the case, then we should be ready to lose.
You mentioned the priest who said that if if the world is against the truth, or rather Saint Athanasius said that if the world is against the truth, then I'm against the world. There's a reason just to maybe poke on society, Dogo. There's a recent priest who was cast out of the Church of England. I forget his name, Father someone, who was going against the idea that the church should accept homosexuality.
I think I know who you're talking about. Yes, it's called Reverend Calvin Robinson, I think. Yes, he's an Anglican. You no, he was Anglican, but he was thrown out of the Anglican Church because he refused to go along with all this gender ideology. So I think he joined something that was called the Free Anglican Church or something, or the Free Church of England. There obviously is the Anglican Church. You can call it the Church of England. Yeah, so he refused to go along. And this is an example of what it means to be a man. Um, that even if people in the church betray Christ, we have to be ready to follow Christ, even if it means we will be outcast even in the church. In that sense, like he has been kicked. So uh, the church must be faithful to Christ, must be faithful to the deposit of the faith, and cannot betray Christ, not even in the smallest way possible, including in the teaching of Christ on sexuality, which is also part of the Beatitudes. If you think of it, when Christ speaks about this is now already, you remember the Beatitudes in Matthew starts from Matthew chapter 5, but then goes on, no? 6, 7, 8. Christ is speaking about all this, you have heard it was said. So he says that he has not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill them, and that not an iota, not a dot will be left unfulfilled. And he gives the law its ultimate meaning, including the laws that have to do with human sexuality. And in fact, you notice that he does not um, compromise them. He doesn't lower the bar. If anything, he raises it higher. It's not just the externals. The heart has to be aligned with yes. So what we cannot do is to go along with churchmen or people who betray Christ. We have to resist and we have to reject such teachings and to stick to Christ and the perennial teaching of the church, her tradition, what is contained in sacred scripture, the saints who are witnesses to that, especially the fathers of the church. And yeah, like we've mentioned, Saint Athanasius. Another one is Saint Irenaeus, who says God's glory is man fully alive. So when we live out our life according to the Beatitudes, we can't be more alive than that. We can't be more filled with happiness than that. Yeah. Here on earth and happily forever in heaven. That's the reason. That's the reason why we're here. In fact, that's the point of the Catechism. It says that God created man in order for man to know Him, to serve Him, and in order for man to know Him, to love Him, and to serve Him here on earth and happily forever in heaven.
So now the thing I told you earlier that's crossed my mind as you were speaking about, especially self-sacrifice. I was having a discussion yesterday with a lady friend of mine. Sorry, the lady friend of mine, and one of the points she made, we were a bit arguing about. She was putting across the point that women are more enduring than men. So ideally, of course, naturally, I did not agree with that. I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, women carry babies for 9 months. I was like, men carry families for 50 years. So anyway, and one of the points rather she was making about that is the sacrificial aspect of the nurturing spirit, which mostly it's women who have it. And it's interesting how you just mentioned men sacrificing. For example, the captain who was captured with the men sacrificing himself that he should first see that his men have eaten so that he can eat himself. So how do you draw the connection between masculinity, masculine values and feminine values?
Yes.
Yes.
So obviously they are very interconnected. And here we speak about femininity rather than feminism. So femininity,
Femininity instead of
feminism, right? So for instance, that women want strong men. No woman wants a weak man, and that's why when we embrace our masculinity and we become more manly, so manliness, then you see we are helping the feminine to flourish, in, and and then when you can imagine now when they come together, then you have like an indestructible unit. That's what marriage is meant to be, um, a lifelong union between a man and a woman that is open to life and that is faithful to the end. And therefore, if they have embraced their femininity and their masculinity, then you tend to have strong families. Yes, strong marriages. And the opposite is true. When you have weak femininity and weak masculinity, when you have a weak family, a weak marriage. So I think in that sense, and obviously when it comes to things like, yeah, the values of femininity and masculinity, you realize in many ways they are complementary, and there are also many similarities. But definitely there are things that only women can do, and there are certain virtues that are extolled more by the women, and the opposite is also true. And you can say they're geared towards precisely happiness. One of the things that you notice about a happy marriage is precisely one that has embraced all these virtues. And amongst them, obviously, is that idea of sacrifice, because at the heart of sacrifice, at the heart of love is sacrifice, because love is about the other. So that definitely entails our self-denial, and we deny ourselves in order to give to the other, and at the same time we deny ourselves in order to also grow. When we deny ourselves, for example, bad foods, in order to eat good food that perhaps is not as appetizing, but in order to be healthier and so on, that entails some sacrifice, but then with the idea of giving ourselves to the other, right?
wow. So maybe there's this idea that just as a side note, that when with the example that you just given, that when you're sacrificing bad food, in order to eat good food, it's not as rewarding instantly, at least.
Bad food, maybe we can call it junk food.
Junk food, yes, that's of course, of course, of course.
We all love junk food,
Yeah,
some fries.
we all do, we all do. So the idea is that when what you're really doing, then you're giving to your future self, which in essence is another person. So what do you think about that?
That you're giving yourself.
You're giving to your future self, because
Yeah, that you sacrifice your current self
yes.
in order to give your future self.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah, that makes some philosophical sense.
As a side note, that wasn't my idea, so let me just brush through that. But yeah, I thought it was interesting just to talk about it. So wow, I think further we've just answered almost every question that we have about the correlation between. Now you said there's a line you've just said, and I think it's really important that it should be femininity instead of feminism.
Yes, I say that because I remember a certain priest of happy memory. It's called Father Cormac Burke. He was writing a book actually when before he died, and it was more or less along those lines of femininity versus feminism. And there, obviously, femininity is something virtuous, something good, while feminism is something, shall we say, defective, lacks a certain good that should be there, a due good. And then he was looking at it from the perspective of what has happened in the history of man and so on. So he read, like, in fact, he used to tell us, if you think I haven't read any book on this topic, please let me know and send it to me, But he was a voracious reader and would do lots of research. So unfortunately, he died, and I was hoping that I'll see that book one day coming to light. But there are other good writers also on the topic. One of them has written a book that's called The Marian Option. Fantastic. Which I've read. Then I guess there are others out there that tackle that question.
Wow. So to wrap it up, the few notes I just took, especially about masculinity and femininity, is that when a man embraces masculinity, correct me if I rephrase this, it gives the woman the space to embrace her femininity. So she knows that the masculinity part has already been taken care of.
Yes.
So she embraces her femininity.
And she benefits from a strong
man's
man.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Obviously, if they end up in marriage, hey, you want a man who can protect you. You want a man who can provide, and educate your children. So you benefit, the children benefit. Because obviously being a man means to be also present. A virtuous man is present in the life of his spouse and his children.
Father, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Asante sana.
Now can I go have some lunch?
I know you're
Okay,
hungry.
lunch.
Tutakuachilia.